On the last night of his life, Jesus prayed something that physicists would not be able to measure for another 2,000 years. He had just shared his final meal with his disciples. He knew what was coming: the arrest, the trial, the cross. And in the hours before he was taken, he prayed out loud in front of them. And what he asked for is impossible. He asked that his followers be one with him in the same way he is one with the Father, not similar to, not connected to, one with. He said, and these are his exact words from the 17th chapter of John, that they may all be one as you, Father, are in me, and I in you, that they also may be in us. In me, in you, in us. That is not poetic language. That is not metaphor. That is a description of a physical state that, in 1935, Albert Einstein would call impossible. And then, in 1964, an Irish physicist named John Stuart Bell would prove was real. The state has a name. We call it Quantum-Entanglement. And what Jesus described in his final prayer is the most precise statement ever made about the connection that physics is only now beginning to understand. But before we go there, before we open up John 17 and read it through the equations, we need to understand what Bell discovered. Because once you see what entanglement actually is, the words "I'm always with you" stop being a comfort. They become a measurement. In 1935, Albert Einstein co-authored a paper with two younger physicists, Boris Podolsky and Nathan Rosen, that was meant to destroy quantum mechanics. The paper was an attack. Einstein hated quantum theory. He believed the universe was orderly, predictable, governed by local causes. And quantum mechanics seemed to predict something he found absurd, that two particles, once they had interacted, would remain connected. Not by signals, not by forces traveling between them, but instantaneously, across any distance. You could separate them by a meter, a kilometer, a galaxy, and a measurement made on one would instantly determine the state of the other. Einstein called this spooky action at a distance, and he meant it as an insult. He believed the prediction was so absurd that it proved quantum mechanics had to be wrong, or at least incomplete. For 30 years, the question sat unresolved. There was no way to test it. Then in 1964, John Bell, a physicist at CERN, derived a mathematical theorem. He showed that there was a specific way to test whether Einstein was right or whether quantum mechanics was right. He proved that if Einstein's view of reality was correct, certain experimental results would have to fall within a specific statistical range. If quantum mechanics was correct, the results would violate that range in measurable ways. And then they ran the experiments. In 1982, the French physicist Alain Aspect performed the definitive test. He created pairs of entangled photons, separated them, and measured them at different angles, fast enough that no signal traveling at the speed of light could have passed between them. The results were unambiguous. Quantum mechanics was right. Einstein was wrong. Entanglement is real. In 2022, Aspect was awarded the Nobel Prize in Physics for that work, alongside John Clauser and Anton Zeilinger. The committee's statement was extraordinary in its simplicity. They confirmed, with the highest scientific authority that exists, that the universe is non-local, that particles which have interacted remain connected. That distance, in the deepest layer of reality, is not what we think it is. And it gets stranger. In 2017, Chinese physicists used a satellite called Micius to demonstrate quantum entanglement between two ground stations separated by 1,200 kilometers. By 2025, the same team had extended the distance to thousands of kilometers, sending entangled photons through space itself. Distance is irrelevant. Time appears not to slow the connection. The link between entangled particles is not a signal, it is a state. The two particles are, in some sense, the same system, even though they appear to be separate. Stop and let this land. In the most precise experiments ever performed, with statistical confidence beyond any reasonable doubt, the universe has shown us something that overturns every assumption we have about separation. Two particles, once they have shared a state, remain connected forever, across any distance, instantaneously. Not because they are sending messages, not because there is a hidden signal we have failed to detect, but because, at the deepest level of physical reality, they are not actually separate. The appearance of distance is what physicists now call an emergent property, something that looks real at our scale but dissolves when you examine it closely. The implication is staggering. If two particles can be entangled across galaxies, then the universe we live in is not a collection of separate objects. It is a network of connections. Distance is the illusion. Connection is the reality. And here is what most people miss about this. Every particle in your body was, at some point, in contact with other particles. Every atom you are made of came from a star that exploded billions of years ago. The hydrogen in your blood, the carbon in your bones, the oxygen in your breath. All of it has shared states with countless other particles throughout cosmic history. You are not, and have never been, isolated matter. You are an entangled node in a four-dimensional web of connection that extends across the entire universe and across all of time. And now ask the harder question. If physics is showing us that connection, not separation, is the fundamental architecture of reality, what does that mean for the consciousness that inhabits your body? What does it mean for your relationships? What does it mean for what happens when you pray? What does it mean for what happens at the moment of communion? What does it mean that the most important figure in human history, the one who's shaped 2,000 years of civilization, claimed in his final hours to be in his followers and asked the Father that they be in him? Now turn to the 17th chapter of the Gospel of John. The setting is intimate. Jesus is alone with his 11 remaining disciples. Judas has already left. The arrest is hours away. He knows that this is the last conversation he will have with them as a free man. And he prays, not for himself, not for his survival, for them. Listen to the prayer through the physics. I do not pray for these only, but also for those who will believe in me through their word, that they may all be one, as you, Father, are in me and I in you, that they also may be in us. Read that again, slowly. He is asking the Father that his followers, every person who would ever come to him across 2,000 years, across continents, across cultures, be in the same kind of unity that Jesus shares with God. A unity that is not metaphorical, not symbolic, not emotional. A unity in which one is in the other, where the boundary between persons becomes, at some level we have not yet named, porous, where what opens to one is, in some real sense, happening to the other. He continues, I in them and you in me, that they may be perfectly one. In them. That is not a sentiment, that is a structural claim. Jesus is describing a state of being where his life and the lives of his followers are not two separate things existing in proximity. They are entangled. And then the Apostle Paul, decades later, without ever having met Jesus in the flesh, without any knowledge of quantum mechanics, without any framework for what he was describing, writes the same thing again and again. In the first letter to the Corinthians, chapter 12, "Now you are the body of Christ, and individually members of it. Not like the body of Christ, not similar to, are the body of Christ." He is making a physical claim about the nature of the connection. The believers in Christ are not separate things linked by belief. They are, in some real sense, parts of the same body. In the letter to the Colossians, chapter 1, verse 27, "Christ in you, the hope of glory." Christ in you, not Christ near you, not Christ thinking of you, Christ in you. In the letter to the Galatians, chapter 2, verse 20, "It is no longer I who live, but Christ who lives in me." Read the language carefully. Paul is not describing influence, he's not describing inspiration, he's describing co-location. Two consciousnesses occupying the same physical body, two lives entangled in a single existence. For 2,000 years, theologians have read these passages as poetic mysticism, beautiful language about a deep spiritual feeling. They are not. They are precise descriptions of an ontological state, a state that physics has now confirmed is possible, a state called entanglement. And in the last words of the Gospel of Matthew, Jesus says it directly. After his resurrection, before his ascension, he tells his disciples, "I am with you always, to the end of the age." I am with you, always, to the end of the age. That is not a promise of memory. That is not a promise that he will think about them sometimes. That is a description of an entangled state, a connection that is not bounded by space or by time. A connection that, like the photons, separated by 1,200 kilometers, remains intact regardless of distance. You have never been separated from him. Not because of sentiment, because of physics. And now we come to the moment that has divided Christians for centuries, and the moment that, read through Entanglement, becomes the most precise scientific demonstration ever performed in human history. On the same night that Jesus prayed for his followers to be one with him, he did something else. He took bread, he blessed it, he broke it, and he gave it to them, saying, "Take, eat, this is my body, given for you." He took a cup of wine, he blessed it, and he gave it to them, saying, "Drink from it, all of you. This is my blood of the covenant, which is poured out for many." For 2,000 years, Christians have argued about what those words mean. Some have said it is symbolic. Some have said it is literal. Some have said it is real but mysterious. Read it through quantum mechanics, and a different possibility appears. What if Jesus was describing entanglement? The bread and the wine in his hands, in that moment, became entangled with his body, not metaphorically, not symbolically, physically. At the deepest layer of reality, where the boundaries between objects dissolve, the matter of that meal became one system with the matter of his body. And then he gave it to them, and they ate, and they drank. And in that act, the entanglement extended. The matter of his body, now entangled with the bread, entered their bodies, became part of them. Their cells incorporated his presence, not as memory, as state. And then, before going to the cross, he said one more thing. "Do this in remembrance of me." In Greek, the word translated as remembrance is anamnesis. It does not mean recall. It means make present again. To reactualize, to bring something that exists outside time into this moment. Every time the church has gathered around bread and wine for 2,000 years, that act has, if Jesus meant what he said, extended an entangled state across time and space. Each person who has eaten and drunk has become, at the level where physics says connection is real, one system with the body that hung on the cross. 2,000 years away, geographically distant, temporally distant, and yet in the only sense that ultimately matters, present. This is why prayer works. Not because you are sending a signal across space to a distant God who must hear and respond, but because you are accessing a connection that already exists. You are not reaching out to something far away. You are recognizing what is already in you. Christ in you, said Paul, the hope of glory. So, why does it feel like you are separate? If physics is showing us that the universe is non-local, if Jesus is saying that he is in you and you are in him, if the entire architecture of reality is connection, not isolation, why does most of human life feel like loneliness, distance, separation from God? The answer, surprisingly, is the same as the answer in the previous episodes of this series. Your consciousness is in the wrong place. Entanglement does not require that you feel connected. It is a structural property of reality. It exists whether you perceive it or not. The two photons separated by 1,200 kilometers are connected. They do not need to know they are connected. The connection is what they are. And you are connected to Christ in the same way, not because you feel it, because of the structure of your existence. But your perception is constructed by your brain. And your brain, as we explored in the episode on consciousness, is a filter. It filters out almost everything in order to give you a manageable experience of reality. Most of what you actually are, most of what you are connected to, is filtered out. You are entangled with Christ. You are entangled with everyone who has ever taken communion. You are entangled at some level with the entire web of being that physics is now beginning to describe. But you do not perceive most of it, most of the time. The good news is that the connection does not depend on your perception. It is real whether you feel it or not. The better news is that perception can be retrained. Prayer is not a phone call to a distant God. It is the act of turning your consciousness toward what is already true. It is the recognition of a connection that has never been broken. When Paul writes, "Pray without ceasing," he is not asking you to mumble words constantly. He is describing a state of consciousness that lives in continuous awareness of its entangled nature. Not striving, not begging, simply present to what is. When Jesus says, "Abide in me and I in you," he is not asking you to do something extraordinary. He's asking you to recognize what is already structurally the case, to stop pretending you are separate, to live, finally, in the truth of your entanglement. So here is what this means. Every moment of your life, you have been physically connected to a person who lived 2,000 years ago, died on a cross, rose from the dead, and prayed, in his final hours, that you would be one with him. Not metaphorically, not sentimentally. Physically, measurably, in the architecture of reality that the most precise experiments in human history have now confirmed. You have never been alone. When you felt abandoned in the worst nights of your life, the connection was there. When you doubted, the connection was there. When you walked away, the connection was there. When you forgot, the connection was there. Because entanglement is not a feeling, it is not a relationship you maintain, it is a state you exist in. Like the photons separated across continents, what happens to one happens to the other, regardless of perception regardless of distance, regardless of time. And the one you are entangled with is not absent. He is not far. He's not waiting on the other side of death to be reunited with you. He said it himself. I am with you always. Not I will be, not I was. I am. The eternal present we explored in the last episode, the I am that exists outside the flow of time, is the same I am that is entangled with you right now as you hear these words. The bread and the wine were not symbols of a distant memory. They were the activation of a connection that crosses every boundary you thought was real. The body of Christ is not a building. It is not an institution. It is the entangled web of every person who has ever consciously entered that state. Across 2,000 years, across every continent, across every language. All of them, all of you, are nodes in a single, non-local field whose center is the man who broke bread on the night he was betrayed and said, "This is my body." You are not separate from God. You have never been separate from God. The distance you have felt is the filter, not the reality. The loneliness you have suffered is the perception, not the truth. The longing for connection that has driven your entire spiritual life. That longing is not the search for something missing. It is the resonance of something that has never left. Christ in you, the hope of glory. That is not poetry. That is the most precise description of the architecture of your existence ever given in human language. You are entangled with him. You always have been. And the only thing standing between you and the felt experience of that connection is the direction of your attention. Turn it, now. Because in this exact moment, the only one that actually exists, you are not alone. You have never been alone. And it was spoken directly to you